So Anna, let me get this straight. So when Shalice asked me to take out the garbage and I forget, you mean to tell me I'm not suffering from Alzheimer's disease, right? I'm good.
You are good.
Oh, I'm good. Oh man,
You are good. Yeah.
I was hoping I could blame it on
Right?
something. You know.
It's intentional. Don't listen to your wife's disease.
God,
That's
dog
what
it,
that
Anna,
is.
that was a softball, and you didn't even knock it out the park. You could have helped me there. Hey there, welcome back with Married People's Business. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Tobert,
I am Shalice Tobert.
and we have another great show for you. We have two very important guests with us today. Do you want to introduce our guests?
Absolutely. Well, we've got Anna Himes and Jacoby Davis today. So we're going to be talking about a topic I think that's very relevant with these two individuals that are very knowledgeable in this area.
Absolutely. And the topic of this podcast is 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. And you know we are the Married People's Business Podcast, MPB, baby, MPB.
Yes.
And we always want to give our audience and people that are following us great information, things that impact relationships. And one of the things that impacts relationships is the Alzheimer's disease, unfortunately. So we thought this would be a great topic because this is something that has, unfortunately, detrimental impacts on how we communicate with each other. It could be family, it could be friends, it could be spouses, it could be just
Business
all across
partners.
the board. So
Yeah.
we wanted to give you some information and content on how to spot the signs of this disease. So why don't we go ahead and get started? We'll jump right in.
All right. So let me tell a little bit about each of our guests.
Yes.
Anna Himes is a Ball State psychology graduate and community outreach specialist with Indiana University's grant-funded project Collaborative for Aging Research and Engagement, also known as CARE, a project focused on increasing Alzheimer's disease and related dementia awareness and education. Through CARE, Anna has had the opportunity to collaborate with multiple community partners in bringing education to the public, including in her role as a community educator with the Alzheimer's Association. Welcome, Anna.
Welcome, Anna.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Happy
man.
to be here.
She got that degree from Ball State too. I saw on her resume.
Oh, man.
So you forgot
Chirp,
about
chirp.
as chirp. I hear you. Go ahead, talk to them.
You
Talk to the
know.
people, Anna. Talk to the people.
There we go.
I'll give my man Jacoby the honor because I really want to make sure I pump him up. Because when we was getting ready for this podcast, man, Jacoby, he said he has so many dang on letters and acronyms after his name
Look,
that I just could not even fathom. And I said, brother, you might as well put the FBI in the back.
he's degreed.
In the back. Yes, he is educated. But my man Jacoby, he is with the Alzheimer's Association. You see the LND in the back of his name and the CE. We're gonna let him explain that. But Jacoby also he served our country admirably, and also he's into fitness as well. We're gonna talk about a little bit of that in terms of how that can help us combat the disease as well, because fitness, based off of all the things that I've read, is also an important thing that we can use to fight the Alzheimer's disease. So why don't we get started? 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease. Do we want the Ball State grad to go first? Do we want the man with all the alphabets behind his name to go first? Which one of y'all want to go first to start us off? You got 10 signs.
I can hop in.
Okay,
can hop
all right,
in
Anna.
and,
Chirp, Anna.
Yeah,
Go
chirp,
ahead.
chirp. Here comes the bird. Yeah. So, just to give a little bit of a baseline too, for some context about Alzheimer's disease, I've had the opportunity to go out and speak with so many different people and hear different people's experiences with disease, and also people who haven't really heard about it at all. And also hear some common questions that get put out quite frequently. One question that I hear quite frequently in the community is, what's the difference between Alzheimer's disease and dementia? So I think that might be a good place to start, just by stating dementia is the umbrella term. So dementia refers to a myriad collective of disorders that can affect the brain regarding things like memory, but not just memory, as we'll see. Also things like emotion, mood, cognition, spatial recognition, all kinds of things. Whereas Alzheimer's disease it is a kind of dementia, but it's not the only one there. And Alzheimer's disease in specifics is more related to a very specific malfunction of two types of proteins. So I won't go too far into the science with that, but just stating this difference just as a little bit of a contextual basis here. But starting off with our first signs. So the first sign that most people probably are a little bit more familiar with when it comes to seeing changes in Alzheimer's disease is memory loss that disrupts daily life. So this is really probably, the most common thing that people first think of. I've heard all kinds of things from folks too, calling Alzheimer's disease like old timers disease, stuff like that, and having a lot of like opinions of what Alzheimer's disease looks like. It looks like forgetting your cat's name or forgetting all kinds of things. But it's really a lot more nuanced than that. And also note there, it doesn't just happen to folks who are over 70, not even just folks who are over 60. There are cases of Alzheimer's disease happening at earlier stages too, and at early onset Alzheimer's disease, which I'm sure Jacoby can talk quite a bit about as well.
So Anna, let me get this straight. So when Shalise asked me to take out the garbage and I forget, you mean to tell me I'm not suffering from Alzheimer's disease, right? I'm good.
You are good.
Oh, I'm good. Oh man, I was hoping I could blame it on something.
It's intentional. Don't listen to your wife disease.
Dog it, Anna. That was a softball, and you didn't even knock it out of the park. You could have helped me.
That's like a very interesting point to bring up too, just with how there is like normal aging, and then there is something that is Alzheimer's disease and signs that are more important to look out for.
I do have a question, and this I can throw this to Jacoby as well. When we talk about the first sign of Alzheimer's, and Anna talked about memory loss, one of the things that she kind of mentioned was, it sounds like, there's some nuance there in terms of how we even describe the disease, dementia versus Alzheimer's disease. Now, help lay people in terms of the communication aspect of when we are dealing with people that do have the disease. Are there terms that we just should not absolutely use because it just would be derogatory and it would make the person feel bad, or if it's just not politically correct? Because I'm sure people that are listening and our audience, are completely, at least some of them, at least like me, are uneducated about the disease. So are there terms that we just should stay away from? Anna mentioned old timers disease. Is that the appropriate term, or are there derogatory terms we should stay away from?
I've grown to dislike the term old timers disease over time, only because it's misleading, and it does a disservice to the person who's suffering under it. And I say that because what happens is, when you say old timers disease, they just have old timers, it's so dismissive. And so when I say it's dismissive to actually what's going on with that person. So if that person is forgetting things, they're actually, leaving shoes in the freezer or things like that, and you dismiss it as old timers disease, what happens is now you prolong the person, enabling them to get help that they need. So now you're not taking them to the doctor, or now you're not taking them to the person who can actually specialize in that area. And they're not getting the testing, they're not getting anything, because now we've dismissed it with the term old timers.
Yeah, and I guess that makes sense because it does have somewhat of a negative connotation, saying as you get older, you just forget stuff. And as you said, we don't think about the actual health portion that goes along with it, whether it's the psychological, the emotional, or the physical health that goes along with that. And so I think you make a great point in pointing that out.
So what is the second sign, Jacoby, that you can kind of talk to us about, and that our audience should be looking for when they're interacting with people that may have the disease, that we can maybe intervene and help?
The second one is actually challenges in solving or planning. What I tend to realize with people I've encountered over time is that they're not able to balance their book or their checkbook, or they're not able to pay bills due to their memory loss. When you start seeing changes like that, when you start seeing someone who normally is pretty good at taking care of some of their daily living, such as bills or going to the grocery store, making a grocery list and things of that such, we tend to pay close attention to that because, Mom, you used to always make a grocery list before you go to the grocery store. Or, Mom, you used to always pay this bill. How'd you miss 2 months of this? Or, you didn't balance the checkbook right. It's many things that you could probably key in on that person is actually, that there's a certain change with that individual. And so, yeah, like I said, the second warning sign to that is actually challenges in planning and solving problems.
Yeah. So what? I gave you some grief about your about being the alphabet boys and ABC, FBI, LND, CE. What are all the names? What are all the letters behind your name? And tell us a little bit about the Alzheimer's Association before we go on to the number 3 warning.
Okay, so my LND title, that's Legacy Neighborhood Director. The Legacy is the place that I am the director at. It's a part of the Prairie Lakes Health Campus that I am an employee of. I've been a director for about going on 3.5 years now for the memory care, and just seen all aspects of dementia, from being a CNA to social worker to now the director, and just all the different facets that come along with helping someone who suffers under dementia. The CE is community educator for the Alzheimer's Association. I go out publicly and I talk about dementia, Alzheimer's, and we just discuss that in different sectors and different communities quite often. So,
I said before we move on to the next warning sign, when I looked at the Alzheimer's Association website, there was something that really jumped out at me that really shocked me in terms of one of the symbols or signs of early onset. And one of those things was the forgetting of family recipes. And with food being such an integral part of the African-American experience, we love our soul food and we love our grandmothers to cook soul food. So, it really was scary to see that can be a sign of early onset, that the forgetting of recipes. If the sweet potato pie just starting to taste funny, or certain things that our grandmothers and our family members were able to cook, but they can't cook now. We chalk it up to auntie just can't cook, but it actually could be a sign of something else. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Number one, I think, and this is me personally, I believe that the food in itself, some of the soul food in itself is pretty questioning, actually. I wouldn't be surprised if it contributed to that. However,
oh wow,
moving towards what we kind of discussed before,
you killing Shalise over here.
Planning. I'm not gonna say that no more. I'm just gonna keep going.
I'm like, no. I want my greens. I want my hot water cornbread. I want all that.
I don't bring nobody's Sunday down at all. But however, when it comes to again, from number 2 to this is more like the planning part of it. The planning and not being able to complete the task at hand. And I've had a family who was pretty skeptical about what mom was doing. How come? And you're right. How come the pie didn't taste like it should? Or normally, that's a true scenario. Actually, that's how they found out that there was something missing. Now, did they get help right away? No. But that was a pure sign as to, hey, does this taste like the apple pie that she used to make? Is something missing in it? And then you go and you research and you go back and see exactly what she's doing in the kitchen. She's forgetting a lot of the ingredients that's in there. And so, however, this is one of the ways that you can actually go back and see that this is a sign that a person may be or could be suffering from Alzheimer's.
Wow. So then that kind of alludes to the third warning sign that we have, the difficulty completing familiar tasks. So as Jacoby alluded to, and Anna jump in, completing the daily tasks. So just tasks such as cooking. Is that something that we need to be paying attention to? And I guess my question from that would be, is there a specific stage of Alzheimer's that these symptoms come up in?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first point, really talking about this point of difficulty completing familiar tasks, the key word here is familiar. And that's really how we're going to see differences between like what's normal aging and what maybe even is just having a difficult day versus what might be something that might be a little bit bigger. Something like familiar tasks of cooking, alluding back to what we just talked about with cooking, I spoke with someone who talked about her mother and how she found out that something was going on. Was her mom usually made this wonderful white chili bean chili, and she put something completely different in it that made it taste completely, totally different. And her mom really had no idea what was wrong with the chili. So that's something that is important to key in on. This is the familiarity of tasks. And when it comes to stages of Alzheimer's disease, all of these symptoms and signs that we are listing right now, they aren't black and white. So it's not something where you're going to see all of these at certain points, or you're only going to see a couple of these at certain points, and then others will pop up and then others won't. They all will have an individual process or show up in a very unique way according to a specific person's journey with this. So it's not going to be like a hard or fast line when it comes to these signs. Now, it will, with Alzheimer's disease, get progressively worse. And there are different stages in Alzheimer's disease. Most people will refer to early and then late stage, but there are different ways of categorizing stages that can be sought after more in the Alzheimer's Association's website. If anyone is interested in getting into like the nitty-gritty of classification. But when it comes to symptoms, they don't always show up the same for every person, and they do get progressively worse if it's Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah, so I had the pleasure of meeting Anna on an advisory group, the CARES advisory group. And one of the things that I learned in that group, which I thought would be a great podcast around this issue, was particularly how this disease can affect your spouse. And as married people, both Shalise and I are in the process of taking care of aging parents as well. And there's so many groups, married couples that are going through that right now. But one of the things that I think is important too, that you touch on, Anna, is difficulty completing familiar tasks. I experienced that firsthand with my grandmother, who forgot her way to church. She just could not remember how to get to church. And that's how we were able to figure out that there was something that was not right and that she was suffering from Alzheimer's. So the difficulty completing familiar tasks is one that I think is often overlooked because we just chalk it up as, hey, this person is just getting old, or whatever we chalk it up to, and a lot of times it's denial, right?
Mm-hmm. And I think too, that's where the power of family when it comes to this disease is so important, because oftentimes it's loved ones who are able to see this first. It's not clinicians. Clinicians don't know these, they don't know people who are going through these signs. And it was only because you and your family knew how important church was and how important and how familiar traveling to church was. It was only because that the woman that I mentioned who knew her mom's chili, she knew how important that chili was, and she knew that her mom knew how to make that chili. And so when it comes to difficulty completing familiar tasks, that's really where knowing the person comes into play. Because a lot of times, you mentioned denial, a lot of times folks who are experiencing these signs, they might they might try to shrug it off, or it might be a little bit scary. They are so competence, right? Like, folks are used to being competent with knowing how to make this chili or knowing how to get to a certain place. And it can be scary to think that there is something else that's going on, which is where having family and loved ones come in a completely non-judgmental way is so incredibly integral with this.
And I think it's important to note that as we move into the next symptom or sign, warning sign, confusion with time or place. Not only to me, as we do a podcast, our podcast is based around married people, but it's also around business partners and people that are collaborating to do things together. Those might be people that notice things that family is not noticing. So when it comes to confusion with time or place, and we're in a business together and you're not where you're supposed to be, or with appointments or things like that, if I'm noticing that in my business partner, then do you have any suggestions as we talk about this sign as to how someone that's not family can bring it to the family's attention?
I'll let Jacoby jump in on this too, but that's a very interesting point, especially when considering how vulnerable and like tentative this can be outside of family. You never want to approach anyone from a disrespectful point of view. I'll let Jacoby jump in just in case. I don't want to talk too much.
I know I've seen that quite a bit, where families have difficulty convincing the person something wrong. One of the ways that was suggested to make sure that this person got the help that they needed was to kind of like sneak in the doctor at an appointment. Now, it was mentioned just briefly, a lot of doctors don't recognize the signs and understand dementia to an extent to where they can actually make a proper diagnosis of the dementia. So bringing in a person, an expert in the room at the doctor's appointment can help, as far as a cognitive test, getting cognitive tests from that expert, ensuring that, they can get that testing done maybe at their appointment. Therefore, you don't have to take them somewhere and try to convince them that they need this testing or that there's something wrong with them. They can somehow sneak that appointment if they're already made appointment. And that's one of the ways that was mentioned before in the conversation, that a person can actually get their testing and find out what's going on.
Confusion with time or place, just as you stated, it is similar to forgetting. This could look like forgetting the actual date that a person has, but it also could look like experiencing some kind of time blindness. So just not experiencing time the same way that they had previously. So that could look like not realizing that, oh, wow, Friday's only a couple days from now, or it's really this month. And this, once again, this will change in severity depending on the stage of Alzheimer's disease and where we're at. But it's completely normal for anyone, right, to be like, oh, wait, what day is it? Oh, it's June 23rd. Oh, I thought it was June 20th. That's completely normal, especially if someone is super stressed out, or if they're very busy and things have kind of been going by. But it's really about the intensity and how severe it becomes and how much it impacts a person's daily life. And when it comes with confusion or place, that can, especially in the later stages, can really become apparent when folks are walking outside and they walk 5 minutes from their house and they can't travel back to their house. And that's something that can become very severe with time.
So it's not about, oh, I forgot our anniversary date. Oh, I forgot your birthday.
Right, you can't quite run away from that.
Okay, can't say this is where we had our first date. Oh, I thought it was here.
Right,
okay.
Right.
I'm taking other mental notes if you can't tell already.
Of course. Yeah. Although that being said, though, it could potentially be a sign, though, if someone is forgetting important dates. Not always, so you can't use it as an excuse, but sometimes it could be the case.
See, I'm a huge pop culture guy, And for all the people that are listening, I gotta have some Soprano fans out there.
Here we go.
I love the show The Sopranos, and what I thought was so dynamic about that show is that it touched on so many different world life things. And I don't know if you guys watched The Sopranos, but there was a part where Uncle Junior was this mob boss and always in control and always in power. He's an older guy and just decided to walk outside one day in his robe. And I thought that was a very powerful scene and storyline because, in the mob, everything is about control. So they could not come to terms with the fact that maybe Uncle Junior was maybe having early onset of Alzheimer's. And they never really squarely dealt with it in the show, which pretty much I would imagine that's how most people probably deal with it because they don't know how to. Is that a fair assessment or not?
No, I asked a question once to my staff, and I said, why do you think we get people in a little bit later, like in later stages? We don't never necessarily get them in the early stages. Why is that, you think? And some people said, maybe they didn't recognize the signs. I said, okay, I'll take that. But one of the reasons why a lot of times people come in later to my facility and they get admitted to the facility a lot later is because, number one, you have a life. You have a wife. You may have a husband, some children. You have a job. You have a lot of things going on in your life. And with that being said, the last thing you want to do is take on another responsibility. And not that you don't love your parents or not that you don't love your grandparents or whatever. You don't. It's not about that. It's more like sometimes these families, they realize that this is a new task. This is a new responsibility now that I'm adding to my life. So sometimes they turn the left cheek, and they turn away from the situation that they know is detrimental and that they know there's some changes going on and there's something wrong. So what they do is they don't look at the problem. They try to ignore it. Maybe they'll go away. Maybe we don't have to address it if somebody else addresses it. And so therefore, they do not take on that responsibility right away. It's not until it's blatant and when the person's in trouble, that's when they go and get the help. But by that time, we're probably mid-stage, stage 5 or 6, when the person is actually getting the help.
Wow. That's a very good point.
And that's a great segue into warning 5. We're almost through the list. What is the 5th warning? I'll shoot that to Anna if you can, Anna. You know what the 5th warning sign that our audience should be aware of if this sign is shown that maybe there's something a little bit deeper than just the person is being who they are.
Mm-hmm. Of course, this one's trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships. So what makes this one particularly apparent in daily living is it can really affect a person's ability to drive. And that's something that can be quite a bit burdensome and definitely a wake-up call for a lot of people. Because driving, right, it's such a huge part of independence. And so having that knowledge that this is something that's changing, it can really affect daily living and really be a very apparent sign. And this is something that can be tested by doctors as well. There are a lot of visual tests that are given. But also, it's important to note that trouble understanding visual images and spatial relationships, it might not just be with driving, and if it is with driving, that doesn't necessarily mean, and this goes for all of the signs here, it doesn't necessarily mean this is Alzheimer's disease. It could be something else going on as well.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I'm experiencing this right now with my mom, and one of the things that we started to notice was that she started having balancing problems, where she was just not able to stand steady on her feet. I love my mom, but my mom has always been kind of clumsy. So, for a little while, we kind of chalked it up as just her being clumsy, but it actually ended up being something a little bit more serious than that. Is that kind of what you're talking about, where maybe that's a subtle sign and folks could think it's something else, but really, if your mom is falling down all the time, or tripping and doing things more regular than maybe normal, then maybe there might be something there. Is that a fair assessment?
That's definitely a fair assessment. Doesn't necessarily mean right away that this is something to do with dementia, but it is definitely a sign. And I think an important thing to remember is, especially like Alzheimer's disease, it's not always localized. And when I say localized, what I mean by that is it's not always affecting one part of the brain. It affects all of the brain. And that's why we see such a diversity when it comes to these signs, and why we can see so many different symptoms or signs that this pops up. It's not just memory. It can also include looking like having difficulty with balance as well.
So I want to throw this question to Jacoby because of the hands-on that you have with your facility. Anna mentioned, the driving being the independence. How do you deal with, talking with that person about their independence? I think they would feel their independence being stripped away when you have to tell them they can't drive. Have you had to deal with that at the facility and with families? I mean, I'm sure you have.
Absolutely. A lot of times we tend to forget that our loved one or the person who's suffering from that disease is actually feeling the loss of things that they've had in their lives, such as, like you just mentioned, losing the keys to their vehicle, losing the privilege of driving, losing their house. A lot of our people have lost their houses, losing all types of independence that they used to have. And so dealing with these residents that I have to find a way to make sure that they have control over something. I don't care what it is, and finding a hobby for them is important. Whatever the hobby they had before, such as gardening, or they might like to work in the workshop or something to that effect. Some of them might be artists. Whatever the gifting or the talent is, it's important for them to at least have control of some portion of their life. And so I always seek out a way to find out what it is their interests are and what it is that they're used to be good at, things they used to do, their expertise. Everybody has some form of know-how or expertise, and you want to hone in on that thing so they can make sure that they know they still have some control over their lives.
Well, Jacoby, I appreciate that. And, I think this is a perfect segue into our next warning sign. So can you give us the next warning sign? I think we're up to number 6. What would be the next warning sign that we should be aware of if it starts to kind of creep up and show its ugly head? Then maybe we need to have our loved ones, our spouse, grandmother, grandfather, mother, father looked at. And maybe I can fill that question to Anna, so I think
Sure,
Jacoby answered the last one. Yes.
Sure, yeah. So the next step is, or next warning sign that is new problems with words and speaking or writing. So this could pop up in numerous ways. So with writing, that could even look like having to do with the last sign, which is spatial relationships. So even writing and trying to be able to write images or write words, that can show up as difficulty as well. There can be a little bit more disorder when it comes to writing. And then also when it comes to new problems with words, sometimes folks with dementia or with Alzheimer's disease might experience difficulty coming up with a word. And that for a lot of people, that happens to me all the time. Like, so a word will be on the tip of my tongue. I'll be like, what is it? What is it? What is it? But normally later in the day, I'll be able to get it, or somebody else will be able to help me out, and I'll be able to describe what the word is that I'm looking for and get help with it. But with Alzheimer's disease, this is something that can happen more frequently and can be a lot more intense and happen with even just daily objects. Sometimes folks with Alzheimer's disease might come up with new words in order to describe what they mean. So like, instead of calling a watch, they might call it a wrist clock. And that's just one example of ways that this might manifest itself.
I got a question for Jacoby, because again, I want to thank Jacoby for serving our country honorably. And you're in the U.S. Army, and part of what I saw in your bio was that you also are heavy into fitness as well. So the question that I guess I have for Jacoby is, and Anna too, if you want to chime in, is, are we just a hostage to this disease? Is everyone going to eventually end up with Alzheimer's if we live long enough? And is it avoidable through diet? Is it avoidable through exercise? Are there things that we can do to head off this disease and stop it from ever affecting our families?
I don't want to be the one to sit here and say that that's the cure-all for this disease at all. What I would say is, it's exhaust all your resources. If nutrition is a thing that you need to upgrade in your life, as far as eating right, eating your vegetables, taking advantage of fruits and things of that such, take advantage of that. Let that help you in your journey of health. Exercise is definitely helpful. It's not going to hinder you from not getting disease. It will help you, and it will help you along your fitness and health journey. So exhausting those resources as far as fitness and nutrition are all ways to actually help prevent. Will it prevent it? I can't say. I don't want to say that. But will it help? Absolutely.
So then that leads me to this question, and I'm not, by far assuming that you all are medical doctors, but is this something that's hereditary or specific causes? I don't know. I guess I'm asking it the right way. So are there specific causes, or is this something that, you can check in your family line and say, have we had a history of Alzheimer's in our family or anything like that, to know if a person is at a higher risk in having it or experiencing it?
There definitely is a genetic component when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, and that's quite a strong component. That being said, I think there was language around, like, are we all captive to Alzheimer's disease, even if it runs in our family? And the answer is definitely no. There are ways to reduce risk, as Jacoby mentioned. All the ways that a person would take care of their life and their body in general are good for the brain altogether. Another important thing to mention is what's good for the heart is good for the brain. Scientists and researchers are starting to find out even a greater relationship between the health of the heart and the health of the brain and how they interact with each other. So while there is a genetic component and folks can get tested to see if they have that genetic component, that does not mean that, oh, I got tested, it shows that it's in my family, I'm going to get it. It doesn't mean that. There are still things that can be done to help reduce the risk. And even with that genetic component, it's not like a sentence or anything like that.
Okay.
We're up to number 7. What's the 7th warning sign that we should use as a trigger that maybe our loved ones, spouse, parents, grandparents may need help?
Yeah, so the 7th one is misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. So the key phrase in this one is losing the ability to retrace steps, because we all misplace things. I misplace things all the time, especially with my attention. I'm always losing my keys and having to pick it up. And also it depends on the person and how well you know them. If it's something where, oh man, they're just always losing their keys like me, then it's probably not going to be all that strange for me to keep losing my keys, but then still be able to find it later. But if this is someone who normally is pretty like able to know exactly where they put things, and all of a sudden that's changing, or if they're able to, or unable rather, to retrace their steps and find it later, then that is a cause for concern.
Yeah. So me misplacing, like you said, keys, or like if I misplace a file at work, because I want to make sure that, sometimes we're spending more time with our coworkers than we are our family members. So they may see something that our family members may not see. So I'm trying to rope in, just the whole gamut of folks that can help us spot this early on, so that they are aware of these warning signs as well. So if I've, lost a file or can't, find my phone or whatever I need for work, then, looking at what have been Shalisa's habits. Does she lose stuff easily? Or is she well organized and this is out of the ordinary for her? So that kind of a fair assessment.
That's definitely a fair assessment. And I think that brings up such a good point too, that we need to be looking out for our coworkers as well, not just our family. We need to make sure that the care that we give to people that are close in our lives are the care that we give to everybody, and that we get to know folks. And even now, living in a post-COVID world, a lot of us are virtual. That may have some impact in our ability to get to know our coworkers and get to know the people we're working with, but definitely important to get acquainted with others and to see if there are any changes happening.
So I'm sorry, Michael.
No, go ahead.
I got a quick question on that end. Then for Jacoby, are you dealing more with just family members when you're having individuals come into the facility, or have you had the chance to work with co-workers and friends that have noticed things along with the family members?
A little bit of both, actually. More families than anything. On the other side of doing the assessments myself, as far as the resident, the person who's suffering under the disease, between dealing with the assessment of that person, the families, and also co-workers who have their loved ones in our facilities before. These are all different angles of which I've been able to see and actually witness and partake in, the care of that loved one.
Okay.
So what do we have for warning sign number 8? Any one of you want to grace us with warning sign number 8? Jacoby, do you want to take the lead on the 8th warning sign? What is the 8th wonder of the world that we should be cognizant of?
Yeah, so number 8 is decreased or poor judgment. I remember vaguely this person that came in, and their wife brought them in, and they were telling us how he didn't quite make a great decision by going to the grocery store. He had got in his car, started to start the car up, and then he got out the car and walked to the grocery store, left the car running and everything. And that right there is one of the bigger signs that she said he needs to get some help. And so therefore, she immediately got some help, got him in an appointment, and then next thing you know, he was in our facility. Just looking at some of those different things that people normally do is what we've been speaking about probably this entire time. Knowing the baseline of the person and what their abilities are, and then taking that judgment of what they're doing now versus what they used to do, and making a proper decision on getting them some help. So with that being said, like that part, that decision of him actually starting a car, getting in it, and then getting back out of it to walk to the store was a clear sign of poor judgment.
Wow. So that's something that we need to be careful of, particularly with aging parents, because, I can just tell you one of the things that Shalise and I are very, very cognizant of is both of our parents eating. So Shalise does a magnificent job of making sure that my dad, who is elderly, making sure that he is getting the food that he needs, and then her mom, which is my mother-in-law, because they won't eat.
They will not.
They won't eat.
Do I need groceries delivered to the house? That's what I've been doing.
Yeah. So are those some of the signs that, I'm trying to make sure that our audience can really get some really good, easy bake oven factors that they should be able to watch. Oven. I just showed my age.
How old are you?
Easy bake oven. But are there certain categories that like I just gave one, like with the food, like if they're skipping meals, or like you gave one with getting out in the middle of the highway and walking to the grocery store. Is it are there some really easy kind of categories that we should watch for our aging parents, or maybe even the spouse? Is money management? Is it car maintenance? Are those some of the kind of the big ticket items? Food, they're skipping meals, starting to lose weight, that sort of thing?
I would say this, again, just knowing their baseline, just knowing who they are. I mean, we all know our parents. And with that being said, if you know them and you start seeing a difference in them, different decisions, small decisions that they're making that doesn't make any sense, going like leaving to drastic things like leaving shoes in the freezer, or driving down the wrong side of the street, or a one-way street, which I've heard that story before too as well. If you know their baseline, if you know who they are and what their habits are, and they're out of place and things are not as what they normally are, seek the help. It never hurts to seek help anyway. Even if you're wrong about it, seek the help anyhow.
Look, I got a little quick quirk. You said driving the wrong way down a one-way street. Our office building has a one-way street behind it, and people drive the wrong way all the time. So everybody that drives the wrong way got Alzheimer's.
That's early onset.
It's a symptom. It's a symptom. No, but I think I think you make good points though, because my mom has been the type of person that she'll just eat one meal a day and that's it. And she's been that way. You're like, she's always been like that. But now when if she's not eating anything, that's something I have to pay attention to. So yeah, I get it.
This is fascinating information. So we're down to the last two, 9 and 10, and then we're gonna cut Jacoby and Anna off, and we appreciate you giving us your time and this great information. So who wants to take 9?
I got it.
Anna, then Jacoby can take 10, and then you can close us out.
Sounds great.
Ninth warning? What's the ninth warning?
So the 9th warning is withdrawal from work or social activities. So a lot of these warnings too can have to do a lot with mood, and withdrawal from work and social settings can have a lot to do with that as well. But we don't just see this with something like Alzheimer's disease. We have to see this with people who are going through a difficult time, or people who are going through grief, or people who are going through depression. So we don't just see it with Alzheimer's disease, but we can see it with Alzheimer's disease, which is why it's important to keep all these other signs in our heads as well. Another way that this can pop up too is it can be a result directly from Alzheimer's disease, but it can also be indirectly resulted from that. And what I mean by that is some people who are experiencing Alzheimer's disease and are experiencing these signs and symptoms, maybe they know it and they're embarrassed. Maybe they don't want people to see. Maybe they don't want to go to work. Maybe they don't want to go to social activities because they don't want people to see what's happening. So that's just one other way that this can happen and manifest.
Yeah, I saw something on your website that said one of the signs too, which this was fascinating to me. You said if the person has a favorite team and they have trouble tracking their favorite team. And I thought that was just fascinating, because that is fascinating, and it makes complete sense, because if somebody's a lifelong, Bears fan, and all of a sudden they.
Whoa, you said Bears.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. I
thought you were gonna say Lakers because you're a lifelong Lakers fan.
Well, I am. So if you ever hear me talking about I love the Bulls, I got Alzheimer's disease. This early onset, because you will never ever hear me talk about the Chicago Bears or the Bulls.
That you like either way.
Yeah, so anything other than the Lakers, you got to get me checked out, baby. Get me checked
I will.
out. All right?
I will make sure. Check you out and check the bank account.
And check the bank account too. We'll do both. But I thought that was just almost like you almost have to be a social scientist, a social engineer, and we have to really do what is really contrary to the way the world is going, which is to pay attention, stop, look, and listen. Because with all these cell phones and all this stuff that's going on in the world, it's real easy for us to forget our spouse, to forget our parents, to forget our friends, and not to even realize when something is, it's the old saying, if it was a snake, it would have bit you, and some of these signs are so simple if we watch and just pay attention.
And I think that takes us back to something Jacoby said as he's going to round us out with number 10. But he talked about, how people are living their lives and they've got these things going on. So to notice that these symptoms are coming up, not that they're ignoring them, but to have something extra in their lives that they know that this person having these symptoms will bring into their normal routine or add to their life. I think you make a great point saying we got to pay attention. And sometimes we don't do that because, we've got our routine and
it's
life is lifing. And it's actually, yes, that's what I was going to say next.
Yeah, and people don't like disruption. And anytime something disrupts, the natural tendency is to ignore it if it's a disruption. So this has been extremely enlightening.
Yeah.
And Jacoby, close us out. You got 10.
Number 10
is change in mood and behavior. And it kind of goes off of what Anna had said before. It kind of bleeds into that somewhat, that they're withdrawn from things that they normally would be a part of, not partaking in hobbies that they normally used to partake in. And now the frustration and the depression is there. And now in this number 10 slot, you start to see that the person is really angry or upset and their mood has changed. Now, it doesn't mean that it's all about them not denial of the disease. It also could mean they're in the part of the brain where their personality has really switched over. I've had many a times where family members have come in and they say, my mom was never this way. That person is cussing us out and slapping us and beating us up, and all kinds of things. And their mom was never like that. Matter of fact, they were probably the complete opposite of what we were experiencing. And so, and I'm not trying to say that you have to go to that extreme to understand it and know that this person is suffering a disease, but you have to be careful about watching. You have to make sure that you're watching and your parents, whoever it is that you love is under this disease. Be watchful for these tweaks and these changes and things of that such. Again, like I said before, it never hurts to get help. If the help is unnecessary to the point where this person doesn't have that disease, fine. Then they don't have it. More kudos then. And if they have this disease in a result as of you getting the diagnosis and you find out that it's true, kudos again, because now you've gotten somebody some help this time. You can progress and get them a better quality of life.
Well, I think this has been such excellent information, helpful information. What I'd like to ask with each of you, Anna and Jacoby, if you've got any resources, websites that we can guide our viewers and our audience to, definitely I'll give you an opportunity to shout those out or give that information out as we close up the podcast for today. We thank you so much for your time and your wealth of knowledge. I think this is definitely a topic that deserves continued conversation.
I agree 100%. And I want to thank you, Jacoby and Anna, for just being the light on this topic, and just what you're doing in this area is just magnificent. And we would love to have you guys back on in the future to tell us what both CARE is progressing, an advisory board that I am extremely proud to be a part of with you, Anna, and Jacoby, where the Alzheimer's Association is going. And I want this to be a continuous dialogue because the disease is a continuous issue that impacts everybody, and it's not going away anytime soon. At least we hope, because there's a lot of research and science that is out there. So I hope that one day we won't have to talk about it. But until then, I want to make sure I keep a good tab on both of you. So you want to share with us your resources, as Shalise alluded to. What doctor should we even take our parents or our spouse to, and what resources are available out there to folks that are experiencing these issues? And we'll start with you, Anna.
Sure, yeah. So the number one resource that I always reference to folks in the community when it comes for a catch-all with Alzheimer's disease is the Alzheimer's Association website and the Alzheimer's Association hotline. So the website is alz.org, that's alz.org, and then the Alzheimer's Association helpline is 24/7 hours, and it is 800-272-3900. And both of these resources are good with connecting to support groups, connecting to medical support, all kinds of needs when it comes to this disease. When it comes to what kind of doctor you should see, a lot of times folks might see something crop up at their family physician. There might be a sign that is unsettling that the physician notices or a family member notices, and they might be referenced then from there to teams consisting of psychologists, psychiatrists, neurologists are huge. Neurologists are number one when it comes to looking at this disease, neuropsychologists, all kinds of teams that are out there. The Indiana Alzheimer's Disease Research Center, IADRC, also has a lot of good resources when it comes to looking into resources with clinical research as well to try out new treatments that are looking into preventing Alzheimer's disease and slowing down the progression. And then CARE at care.iu.edu, we have a lot of resources too as well to show on our own page.
Excellent. Jacoby, do you want to provide some resources that you would grace our listeners and viewers to?
Sure. Just like Anna said, the hotline is always available at the Alzheimer's Association. I also recommend Touchpoint hats. They are provided service from Community Network, which I think is at this point Kelly Hoffman is one of the people who actually does the assessments for the people who come in and get their cognitive testing. So again, Touchpoint hats, that's a good resource. And again, the Alzheimer's Association is a wonderful resource with our 24-hour hotline.
That is excellent. Married People's Business Podcast. That is a great episode. We really appreciate you again, Jacoby and Anna. Thank you for coming on the show.
Yes, thank you.
And for those of you who enjoyed this content, we're going to ask that you hit the subscribe button, like, follow, and share us. We're on all major podcast platforms. And just make sure that you share this wonderful content and information that Jacoby and Anna has blessed us with. And we're so excited and glad that they were able to come on our show. So we appreciate it, Jacoby and Anna. Thank you very much. Married People's Business Podcast. We're out.
God
See
bless.
you next time. Keep God first. Thank you.